Some names become legends, some become symbols of power, some inspire millions, others leave behind fear, controversy, or mystery. Tupac Shakur, Saddam Hussein, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, Elvis Presley. Four men from completely different worlds. A revolutionary voice. A powerful ruler. A cartel kingpin. The king of rock and roll. Each rose to the very top. Each changed history in his own way. But no matter how great their fame, wealth, or power became, none of them could escape the downfall that awaited. This is the story of ambition, success, legacy, and tragedy. This is the rise and fall of four legends.
Some lives are so extraordinary. They seem destined to end in tragedy. Tupac Shakur wasn't just a rapper. He was a poet, a revolutionary's son, an actor, an activist, the voice of millions who felt forgotten by the world. He turned pain into poetry, anger into anthems, and struggle into one of the greatest careers music has ever seen. More than 75 million records sold, countless lives inspired, a legacy that refused to fade. Yet behind the fame, behind the platinum albums, behind the fearless image, was a young man fighting battles no one could truly see. The higher he rose, the more dangerous his world became. Until one night, a storm of gunfire brought one of the brightest stars in music to the ground. But was Tupac really killed by a gang war? Was he betrayed by those closest to him? Or was his fate sealed long before that fatal night? Tonight, we are uncovering the incredible rise, the devastating fall, and the enduring legacy of a man who lived faster, loved harder, and burned brighter than almost anyone before or since. This isn't just the story of Tupac Shakur. It's the story of how one young man changed music forever, and why the world is still searching for answers. Every legend has an origin. Tupac Shakur's began not with fame or fortune, but with revolution. He entered the world as Lesane Parish Crooks on June 16, 1971, in East Harlem, New York. Yet within his first year of life, his mother made a decision that would shape his destiny forever. Afeni Shakur, a fearless member of the Black Panther Party, renamed her son Tupac Amaru Shakur, honoring the 18th century Peruvian revolutionary who gave his life resisting oppression. It was more than a name. It was a burden, a legacy, a challenge to live for something greater than himself. Long before Tupac understood the weight of that name, life was already testing him. While pregnant with him, Afeni had stood trial in the infamous Panther 21 case, accused of conspiring to bomb public landmarks in New York City. Refusing to back down, she helped defend herself in court and was acquitted just weeks before giving birth. Her fight for freedom became the first chapter of Tupac's story, but freedom didn't mean comfort. Money was scarce. The family moved from one neighborhood to another, chasing stability that always seemed just out of reach. Poverty wasn't something Tupac occasionally witnessed. It was the world he grew up in. Then came Baltimore. For the first time, Tupac found a place where his imagination could thrive. At the Baltimore School for the Arts, he immersed himself in acting, ballet, jazz, poetry, and Shakespeare. Teachers saw remarkable talent. Friends remembered a teenager who could perform classical theater with elegance, then step outside and freestyle with a confidence that left everyone speechless. It wasn't just learning how to perform. He was learning how to tell the truth. His notebooks filled with poems about pain, injustice, love, and survival. Subjects that would later define an entire generation of hip-hop. But while his talent blossomed, life at home continued to unravel. Afeni's struggle with addiction grew worse, forcing another move, this time to Marin City, California. The hopeful young artist suddenly found himself surrounded by gangs, drugs, violence, and the constant pressure to survive. To fit in and help make ends meet, Tupac drifted toward the streets. He sold drugs, He witnessed violence firsthand. Every day became a battle between the future he dreamed about and the reality pulling him back. That conflict would shape the rest of his life. He was a poet with a revolutionary spirit, an artist living in a soldier's world, a young man searching for hope where very little existed, like the rose he would one day write about. Tupac was already learning how to grow through concrete, and soon, the world was about to hear his voice. Tupac's rise didn't begin under the spotlight. It began in the background. In 1990, he joined Digital Underground as a backup dancer and hype man. While fans were watching the Humpty Dance, few noticed the energetic young performer behind the scenes. But Tupac was paying attention. He was learning the music industry from the inside. Every stage, every performance, every mistake, he was preparing for his moment. That moment arrived in 1991 with his debut album, Tupacalypse Now. It wasn't a typical rap album. It was raw, political, unfiltered. Songs like Brenda's Got a Baby told heartbreaking stories of poverty, neglect, and forgotten communities. Tupac wasn't just describing the streets. He was exposing the struggles he had witnessed firsthand. The reaction was immediate. Fans saw a young artist speaking uncomfortable truths. Critics saw a dangerous voice. Even Vice President Dan Quayle publicly attacked the album, calling it harmful and controversial. But instead of backing down, Tupac became even louder. Hollywood soon discovered his intensity. In 1992, he starred as Bishop in Juice, delivering a performance so powerful that audiences couldn't separate the character's rage from Tupac's own fearless energy. Then came Strictly for My Niggas in 1993. The album showed another side of him. Keep Your Head Up revealed his compassion and respect for women, while I Get Around showed his charisma and ability to dominate mainstream music. The album went platinum. Tupac was no longer just a promising artist. He was becoming a superstar. But success couldn't outrun his reality. Violence, controversy, and legal troubles continued to follow him. In 1993, after a confrontation with off-duty police officers in Atlanta, Tupac found himself at the center of another national debate. He claimed he acted in self-defense, while critics used the incident to paint him as reckless. The world saw a troublemaker. His fans saw a young man fighting battles most people never understood. And as Tupac's star continued to rise, the storms around him were only getting stronger. 1994 and 1995 were the years Tupac reached the highest point of his career. But they were also the years when the cracks beneath him began to spread. On the outside, he was becoming a superstar. But behind the fame, Tupac was fighting battles that fame could not solve. In 1995, while sitting in prison, he released Me Against the World, an album that stripped away the gangster image and revealed the wounded person underneath. It was not an album built on arrogance. It was built on honesty, fear, pain, reflection. Despite being incarcerated, the album debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, making Tupac the first artist to achieve that while serving time. On Dear Mama, he delivered one of the most emotional tributes in hip-hop history. He spoke about his mother's sacrifices, her struggles, and the complicated relationship they shared. It wasn't just a song about his mother. It was a song about survival. Millions of people who grew up with broken families, financial struggles, or difficult childhoods heard their own stories in Tupac's words. For a moment, the world saw the person behind the controversy. But just as Tupac was reaching new artistic heights, his personal life was falling deeper into chaos. In November 1994, Tupac walked into Quad Recording Studios in New York, expecting another night of music. Instead, he was attacked and shot 5 times in the lobby. He survived, but the emotional damage was harder to heal. Tupac became convinced that people around him had betrayed him. The trust he once gave freely began to disappear. The experience hardened him, turning a passionate artist into someone constantly preparing for the next threat. Shortly after, Tupac was convicted and sentenced to prison. But prison became a place of transformation. Instead of breaking him, it changed his perspective. He spent hours reading and studying Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, history, philosophy, and politics. He began thinking differently about power, loyalty, and survival. The young rapper from the streets was evolving. He wasn't just making music anymore. He was building a philosophy. Then came the turning point. Suge Knight and Death Row Records entered the picture. Offering to pay his bail, Knight helped free Tupac from prison, and in return, Tupac signed with Death Row. Within months, he returned with an album that changed everything. All Eyes on Me. A double album masterpiece, a statement, a declaration that Tupac was back, and bigger than ever. With massive hits like California Love featuring Dr. Dre and How Do You Want It, he became the face of hip-hop. The world belonged to Tupac. He had money, fame, influence, the power to reach millions. But success came with a dangerous cost. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry with the notorious Biggie Small and Bad Boy Records became more intense. What started as competition turned personal. Diss tracks became public attacks. Friendships fractured. Loyalty became difficult to recognize. The same man who once wanted to inspire change was now surrounded by conflict. The artist who wrote about peace was living inside a war. And the more famous Tupac became, the more difficult it was for him to escape the violence following him. He had finally reached the top of the world. But at the very top, there was nowhere left to climb. Only one direction remained: the fall. Tupac had reached the highest point of his career, but he was also standing closer than ever to the edge. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas was alive with energy. After watching Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight left the arena surrounded by excitement, fame, and chaos. Hours later, everything changed. While driving through the city, a white Cadillac pulled alongside their BMW. For a moment, everything was normal. Then the silence was shattered. Gunfire erupted. Tupac was struck 4 times. The world that had watched him rise now watched helplessly as he fought for his life. For 6 days, he remained in the hospital. Fans gathered outside. Millions waited for a miracle. But on September 13th, 1996, at just 25 years old, Tupac Shakur was gone. The impact was immediate. The world didn't just lose a rapper. It lost a voice. Almost instantly, questions replaced grief. Who was responsible? Was it Orlando Anderson and the street conflict that followed the Tyson fight? And was it connected to the growing East Coast-West Coast war? Was there betrayal from someone close? Or was the truth far more complicated? Decades later, Tupac's murder remains one of hip-hop's greatest unsolved mysteries. But Tupac's fall was never only about the bullets. His story was also about a system that often turns pain into entertainment. An industry that profits from conflict, and a world where talented young voices can be consumed by the same struggles they try to escape. In his music, Tupac warned about violence, poverty, injustice, and a cycle that trapped so many people around him. In many ways, he had been telling the world his story long before it happened. But death could not silence him. After his passing, his music continued to reach millions. Albums like the Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory, and Greatest Hits kept his voice alive. His influence continued to grow, eventually earning him a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and making him one of the most celebrated artists in music history. Tupac became more than an artist. He became a symbol of struggle, a symbol of rebellion, a symbol of a young man who was flawed, complicated, and human, but impossible to forget. The fire that burned Tupac Shakur may have consumed him, but it also created a legacy that still burns today. Tupac Shakur was never a simple story. He was a contradiction, a revolutionary, and a rebel, a poet, and a fighter. A man who preached peace while surrounded by violence. A person who carried both incredible compassion and undeniable flaws. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He hurt people. But what separated Tupac from so many others was that he never stopped searching for meaning. He never stopped questioning the world around him. He never stopped giving a voice to people who felt invisible. That is why, decades after his death, his words still feel alive. Because Tupac wasn't just describing his own struggles. He was describing the struggles of millions. The forgotten. The misunderstood. The people trying to survive a world that often seemed designed against them. He once said, "Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies inside while still alive." And perhaps that's the reason his legacy continues. Because Tupac refused to let the world kill the dream inside him. In only 25 years, he created more than music. He created a movement. He became the voice of people who had no voice. The proof that pain could become art. And the reminder that even the hardest environments can produce something beautiful. A rose doesn't grow through concrete because life is easy. It grows because something inside refuses to give up. Tupac Shakur rose from the streets, touched the highest levels of fame, and left behind a fire that still burns today. Not because he was flawless, but because he was real. So the question remains, what truly destroyed Tupac? Was it the streets that raised him? The fame that surrounded him? Or the battles he carried within himself? Let us know your thoughts. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories of legends who rose, fell, and changed the world forever. This was Tupac Shakur. Rize to Ruin. The fire that burned too bright.
Tupac's music inspired millions. But while one man changed the world through music, another shaped history through power. This is the story of Saddam Hussein. Some lives seem cursed from the very beginning. In a tiny mud village near the Tigris River, a child entered the world carrying nothing but poverty, loss, and rejection. His father was gone. His family was broken. His future seemed destined to disappear into the dust of rural Iraq, forgotten like countless others. It didn't. Instead, that child would rise to command one of the most powerful nations in the Middle East. He would control vast oil wealth, build extravagant palaces, survive assassination attempts, and hold an entire country in the grip of fear. To millions, he became the face of absolute power. To millions more, he became the symbol of tyranny. That is a boy with almost nothing become one of the most feared leaders of the 20th century? What kind of ambition? What kind of brutality does it take to climb that high? And why did it all end with the world's most wanted dictator hiding beneath the earth, alone, as everything he had built collapsed around him? This is not a story of simple heroes and villains. It is the story of a man who discovered that fear could become the foundation of absolute power, and who spent a lifetime making sure no one dared challenge it. From an unwanted child in one of Iraq's poorest villages, to the unquestioned ruler of an entire nation, Saddam Hussein built an empire through ambition, calculation, and ruthless force. He transformed Iraq with oil wealth. He inspired loyalty, demanded absolute obedience, and silenced opposition with brutal efficiency. But every victory carried the seeds of a future disaster. Every triumph created a new enemy. Every decision brought him one step closer to a reckoning he believed would never come. This is the complete story of poverty and power, of coup and betrayals, of devastating wars and unimaginable human suffering, of palaces, prisons, and the cult of one man. A rise so extraordinary it changed the course of the Middle East. A downfall so dramatic it reshaped the modern world. This is the rise and the ruin of Saddam Hussein. Every dictator has an origin. For Saddam Hussein, it began in a forgotten village where survival mattered more than hope. April 28, 1937. Al-Auja, a small settlement of mud houses near Tikrit, in northern Iraq. It was a place where poverty was not an exception, but a way of life, where families struggled to survive, and the future rarely stretched beyond the next harvest. It was here that Saddam Hussein Abdelmajid al-Tikriti was born. Even his first moments were surrounded by tragedy. His father, Hussein Abid al-Majid, a poor landless farmer, had vanished before Saddam entered the world. Whether he died or simply disappeared has never been conclusively established. But he would never know his son. His mother, Subha, was devastated by grief and hardship. According to several accounts, her despair became so overwhelming that she tried to end the pregnancy. When that failed, she reportedly fell into such hopelessness that she considered taking her own life. Whether every detail has been shaped by time and legend is impossible to know. What is certain is that Saddam entered the world without the stability, affection, or security that most children depend upon. His early years offered little comfort. After his mother remarried, he lived under the rule of an abusive stepfather who beat him, humiliated him, and, according to many accounts, forced him to steal to survive. School was a privilege he could rarely afford. He learned to read later than many of his peers, but life had already begun teaching him lessons far harsher than anything found in a classroom. Everything changed when he went to live with his maternal uncle, Khairallah Tulfa, a former army officer and passionate Arab nationalist. Tulfa filled the young boy's mind with stories of revolution, national pride, and resistance against foreign influence. More importantly, he introduced Saddam to a ruthless philosophy that would define his entire life. Power is never handed to you, it is taken. By the time he reached his teenage years, Saddam had developed a reputation as a tough and fearless street fighter in Baghdad. He gravitated toward violence as naturally as others sought friendship, surrounding himself with gangs, intimidating rivals, and throwing himself into political activism. Then, in 1957, at just 20 years old, he joined the BATAT Party, a small but fiercely ambitious movement dedicated to Arab nationalism, socialism, and the dream of uniting the Arab world under a single banner. Many who joined were students, intellectuals, or idealists inspired by political theory. Saddam was different. He wasn't drawn by speeches or ideology alone. He was drawn by something far more powerful: the opportunity to seize power. In life, every person has a moment when their future is set in motion. For Saddam Hussein, that moment came on a dusty Baghdad street. October 7th, 1959. Prime Minister Abdal Karim Qasim's motorcade rolled through the Iraqi capital, unaware that a small team of armed B8 party militants was waiting in ambush. Among them was a 22-year-old Saddam Hussein. As the vehicles approached, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the convoy. Chaos consumed the street. The attackers believed they were about to change the course of Iraq's history. Instead, everything went wrong. Qasim survived. Several members of the assassination team were killed or captured. Saddam escaped, but not unscathed. A bullet struck his leg, leaving him wounded as he fled the city. What happened next would become part history and part legend. According to stories later promoted by the regime, Saddam cut the bullet from his own leg with nothing more than a knife, crossed the Iraqi countryside while bleeding, rode a donkey through the desert, and eventually escaped across the border into Syria before continuing to Egypt. Some details remain disputed, but one fact is beyond question: he escaped. And for Saddam Hussein, survival became another victory. Exile lasted nearly 4 years. In Cairo, he enrolled in law school, but never completed his studies. Politics, not education, consumed his ambitions. During this period, he also married his cousin Sajida Tulfa, the daughter of the uncle who had become the most influential figure in his early life. Then history gave him another opportunity. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party briefly seized power. Saddam returned to Iraq, believing his moment had arrived. It hadn't. Only months later, the government collapsed. He was arrested, imprisoned, and subjected to harsh interrogation. Yet even prison failed to contain him. In 1966, he escaped, returning to the underground movement with a new reputation, not just as a loyal party member, but as a man willing to risk everything for power. Over the next 2 years, he quietly organized, recruited allies, and strengthened the Ba'ath Party from the shadows. Then, in July 1968, everything changed. The Ba'ath Party seized control of Iraq in a swift, carefully planned coup. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr became president. Officially, Saddam Hussein was only his deputy. Unofficially, he was becoming the regime's most indispensable man. He built an extensive security apparatus, expanded the intelligence services, and made sure loyalty was rewarded, while dissent was crushed long before it could become dangerous. In 1972, Iraq nationalized its oil industry. As oil prices surged, billions of dollars flowed into the country. New schools opened. Hospitals expanded. Roads, factories, and universities transformed Iraq at a remarkable pace. To many Iraqis, it felt like the nation was entering a new era of prosperity. But beneath the surface, another Iraq was taking shape. One where neighbors informed on neighbors. Where prisons filled in silence. Where fear became as valuable to the regime as oil itself. Saddam Hussein had not yet become president, but he had already become the most feared man in Iraq. And soon, he would make sure everyone knew it. Every dictator has a moment when power is no longer shared. For Saddam Hussein, that moment came in the summer of 1979. On July 16th, President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr was growing old, and plans for a political union with Syria threatened Saddam's growing influence. It was a risk he refused to take. Under mounting pressure, al-Bakr resigned. The following day, Saddam Hussein became president of Iraq. He had finally reached the top, but he wasn't about to share it. Just days later, Saddam summoned the country's senior Ba'ath Party officials to what appeared to be an ordinary party congress. The room was filled with ministers, generals, and lifelong comrades. None of them knew they were walking into a trap. The meeting began quietly. Then a confession was read aloud, claiming a conspiracy to overthrow the new president. Whether the plot was real or manufactured remains debated. For the men in that room, it didn't matter. Saddam began reading names, one after another. The silence became unbearable. Armed guards stepped forward, pulling the accused from their seats as cameras continued to roll. Some of those who remained were later ordered to take part in the executions of their own colleagues. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty alone would never be enough. In the first wave, 22 senior Ba'ath Party officials were executed. Many more would disappear in the years that followed. With his rivals gone, Saddam reshaped Iraq in his own image. Key positions in the government, military, and intelligence services went to trusted relatives, fellow clansmen, and loyal allies. His portrait appeared everywhere. Children learned songs praising him. The state presented him as the father and protector of the nation. At the same time, Iraq's oil wealth transformed the country. New schools, hospitals, roads, and universities were built. Literacy improved, and opportunities for women expanded. Yet beneath that progress, fear became the true foundation of Saddam's rule. The Mukhabarat monitored the country relentlessly. Political opponents disappeared. Many were tortured. Some never returned. The frightened boy who had once known only poverty and rejection had become the unquestioned ruler of Iraq. And anyone who dared challenge him risked disappearing forever. With all the various events going on in Iraq, the United States and its allies were watching and waiting to strike. They just need an invitation to do so. And Saddam Hussein finally gave them the greatest opportunity. The fall was near. On March 20th, 2003, the United States and its allies launched the invasion of Iraq. The stated justification was that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and maintained links to terrorism, claims that were not substantiated after the invasion. For years, Saddam had presented himself as the man who could never be overthrown. His military had once been one of the largest in the Middle East. His security services had crushed every serious challenge to his rule. But this time, the enemy was unlike any he had faced before. Within 3 weeks, the regime that had dominated Iraq for more than 2 decades collapsed with astonishing speed. On April 9th, Baghdad fell. In Firdos Square, television cameras from around the world captured one unforgettable image. Saddam's towering statue was pulled to the ground by U.S. forces and Iraqis gathered around it. For many, it symbolized the end of an era. For others, it marked the beginning of an uncertain future. As his government crumbled, the man who had controlled nearly every aspect of Iraqi life simply vanished. No speeches, no farewell, no final stand. For the next 8 months, Saddam Hussein became the world's most wanted fugitive. He moved from one safe house to another, relying on a shrinking circle of loyal supporters who risked everything to protect him. The man who had once slept in lavish palaces now spent his nights in cramped hideouts, constantly changing locations, never certain whom he could trust. Each day, his world grew smaller. Each week, more of his allies were captured or killed. The empire he had spent decades building had disappeared almost overnight. Then came December 13th, 2003. Near Tikrit, not far from the village where his story had begun, American forces surrounded 2 seemingly ordinary farmhouses. At first, nothing appeared unusual. The buildings were searched, the fields were inspected. It looked as though the operation would end like so many others. Then a soldier noticed something strange. The ground had been disturbed. Hidden beneath the patch of earth was a small underground bunker, a cramped spider hole, barely large enough for one man. The cover was lifted. Inside, staring back through the darkness, was Saddam Hussein. He was bearded, exhausted, thin, a shadow of the man whose portrait had once covered every street in Iraq. He carried a pistol, but never fired a shot. Without resistance, he was pulled from the hole and taken into custody. The images spread across the world within hours. For supporters, it was heartbreaking. For his enemies, it was the final humiliation of a man who had once seemed untouchable. His trial began in 2004 before the Iraqi Special Tribunal. He was charged with crimes against humanity for the 1982 Dujail massacre, in which 148 Shiite men and boys were killed following an assassination attempt against him. Throughout the proceedings, Saddam refused to appear defeated. He challenged the legitimacy of the court. He interrupted prosecutors. He defended his decisions as the lawful actions of a head of state. The confidence that had defined his rule never completely disappeared. But this time, speeches could not change the verdict. On November 5th, 2006, the judgment was delivered. Guilty. Sentence: death by hanging. Before dawn on December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein was led to the gallows. He refused to wear a hood over his face. As some of those present shouted sectarian taunts, he remained composed and recited the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. Moments later, the trapdoor opened. In an instant, one of the most powerful and controversial rulers of the 20th century was gone. His body was returned to the land where his story had begun and buried, near his birthplace, outside Tikrit. The man who had once ruled through fear, who had built palaces, commanded armies, and believed his grip on Iraq would never loosen, was now part of history. The rise was over. Only the legacy remained. What remains after a man like Saddam Hussein is gone? A country still carrying the scars of his decisions. Millions of lives forever changed by the choices he made. A name that continues to divide history itself. To some, he was a leader who modernized Iraq, strengthened the state, and challenged foreign powers. To others, he was a dictator whose rule was built on fear, repression, and suffering. But beyond the debate, his life reveals something timeless about power. Power can be seized by a man with nothing but ambition and determination. It can be protected through fear. It can make one person appear untouchable. But no empire built by human hands lasts forever. The same land that watched Saddam Hussein rise from poverty would eventually witness his fall. The same nation that once saw his face on every street would watch his statues disappear. From the forgotten child of Al-Auja, to the ruler who held millions in his grasp, to the prisoner discovered beneath the earth, this was the extraordinary rise. This was the devastating ruin. And the echoes of his story still travel across the Tigris River today. Because history does not only remember how powerful people rise, it remembers how they fall. Power built Saddam Hussein's empire. Wealth built the next. His name inspired fear across continents. His empire flew through the skies. This is the story of Amado Carrillo Fuentes. They called him the Lord of the Skies. A man so powerful, he transformed the sky into his own private highway. While rival cartels fought bloody wars on the ground, he was already above them, invisible, untouchable. Authorities believed his empire generated billions. Some investigators even compared his wealth to Pablo Escobar's. Yet, outside the criminal world, almost nobody knew his face. Then, in July 1997, the most powerful drug trafficker in Mexico walked into a private hospital under a false name. Hours later, he was declared dead. But almost immediately, something didn't add up. Questions began to spread. Questions that have never been fully answered. What really happened inside that operating room? How did a poor boy from rural Sinaloa build an empire so powerful the governments feared him? And why, at the height of his power, did he decide to erase his own identity? This is the incredible rise and mysterious ruin of Amado Carrillo Fuentes. December 17th, 1956. Sinaloa, a land of rugged mountains, dust-covered roads, and forgotten villages where poverty wasn't a setback. It was a way of life. In one of those villages, Amado Carrillo Fuentes entered the world. He was one of 11 children, born into a hard-working farming family that owned little more than a small piece of land, and the hope that the next harvest would be better than the last. His father worked from sunrise to sunset, yet no amount of hard work seemed enough to escape poverty. For most families, that was simply life. You worked, you survived, and you accepted that tomorrow would look much like today. But young Amado saw something different. He noticed that while some men spent their lives working the fields, others returned with expensive trucks, new houses, and more money than anyone in the village could ever earn through farming. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One path offered an honest living. The other promised unimaginable wealth. And that second path wasn't as distant as it seemed. It ran through his own family. His uncle was Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, better known as Don Neto, one of the powerful founders of the Guadalajara cartel. To many, Don Neto was a feared criminal. To Amado, he was living proof that a man from Sinaloa could escape poverty. Legend has it that around the age of 12, Amado made himself a quiet promise. "I won't come back until I'm rich." Whether those exact words were ever spoken remains uncertain. But everything that followed suggests he meant every one of them. With little more than a 6th grade education and powerful family connections, Amado left home and entered his uncle's world. There were no shortcuts, no instant fortune. He started where many young recruits did, learning the marijuana fields, watching how shipments were organized, studying the routes that crossed the border. Then came the most important lesson of all: patience. Years later, Don Neto placed him under the guidance of one of northern Mexico's most influential traffickers, Pablo Acosta Villarreal, known as El Zorro de Ojinaga. The Fox. For more than a decade, Amado stayed in the background. He watched, he listened, he learned. While others fought for attention, he quietly studied how power was built. It was a lesson that would change the drug trade forever. But before Amado could build his own empire, someone else's had to fall. When Pablo Acosta Villarreal was killed in 1987, the underworld didn't pause to mourn. It looked for a successor. Power had always belonged to the man who could seize it first. For a time, that man was Rafael Aguilar Guajardo. He took control of the Juarez trafficking corridor, known simply as the Juarez Plaza, one of the most valuable smuggling routes in the Americas. Stretching from Ciudad Juarez to El Paso, Texas, it was far more than a border crossing. It was a gateway. Control the plaza, and you controlled one of the busiest corridors for moving cocaine into the United States. Standing beside Aguilar was a familiar face, Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Patient, reliable, always watching. For several years, the two men worked together. Some described them as trusted partners. Others believed they were simply waiting for the day only one of them would remain. That day came in 1993. While in Cancun, Rafael Aguilar Guajardo was assassinated. The killing sent shockwaves through the Mexican underworld. Whoever controlled the Juarez Plaza would inherit an empire. When the dust settled, Amado Carrillo Fuentes emerged at the top. Whether through careful planning, powerful alliances, or ruthless timing, he now commanded one of the most important trafficking organizations in Mexico. Most drug lords would have celebrated. Amado went back to work. While rival cartels declared war on one another, gunfire echoed through city streets, and newspapers filled with stories of bloodshed, Amado focused on something far more valuable than attention: efficiency. He studied the methods everyone else relied on: pickup trucks, hidden compartments, small aircraft. Each shipment carried enormous risk. Each flight had limited capacity. To Amado, they weren't enough. He wasn't thinking about moving kilograms. He was thinking on an entirely different scale. Instead of relying on small planes, he began acquiring larger aircraft, including commercial Boeing 727s. The passenger seats were removed. The cabins were transformed into enormous cargo holds capable of carrying multiple tons of cocaine in a single journey. It changed everything. Fewer flights, greater profits, less exposure. What had once required several aircraft could now be accomplished by one. The Colombian cartels quickly recognized what Amado had built. First came relationships with figures linked to the Medellin cartel. Later, as the balance of power shifted, the Cali cartel also relied on transport networks capable of moving vast quantities of cocaine north. Amado became one of their most trusted partners. Not because he was the most feared, because he delivered shipment after shipment, year after year. It wasn't long before the underworld gave him a name worthy of his growing legend: El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies. By the mid-1990s, investigators estimated that the Juarez cartel was generating hundreds of millions of dollars every week. Amado's personal fortune was widely estimated to be worth around $25 billion, though the true figure has never been verified. His wealth spread far beyond cash. Luxury ranches, private aircraft, businesses, properties across Mexico and abroad. Authorities later alleged that his network reached deep into Mexican law enforcement and government. Among those eventually accused of protecting him was Division General Jesus Gutierrez Rebolla, the very man entrusted with leading Mexico's fight against organized crime. It was a reminder that Amado's greatest weapon wasn't simply money, it was corruption. Unlike many of the drug lords who craved attention, Amado avoided the spotlight. There were no dramatic television interviews, no carefully crafted public image, very few photographs, very few public appearances. The less people knew about him, the safer he remained. Yet behind that anonymity stood a vast criminal organization linked by authorities to hundreds of murders carried out in pursuit of territory, discipline, and control. At the same time, those who knew him described a man living several lives at once. A father, a businessman, a benefactor in parts of his hometown, where donations to schools, churches, and local projects helped earn loyalty. And a man who constantly changed identities, traveling through countries such as Argentina and Chile, purchasing luxury properties and moving money through trusted associates, while the pressure in Mexico steadily increased. Amado Carrillo Fuentes had achieved what few criminals ever could. He had become one of the richest and most powerful men in the drug trade, while remaining almost invisible. But empires built in the shadows never stay hidden forever. And for the Lord of the Skies, the horizon was beginning to darken. By the mid-1990s, everything was beginning to change. Pablo Escobar was dead. The Colombian cartels were losing their grip. And for the first time, the world's attention shifted toward Mexico. The traffickers who had once been transporters were becoming the new kings of the cocaine trade. At the top of that list was Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The pressure mounted from every direction. American and Mexican authorities intensified their investigations. Public outrage over corruption grew louder. And the powerful allies who had once seemed untouchable were beginning to fall. Among them was Division General Jesus Gutierrez Rebolo, one of Amado's most valuable protectors. The walls were closing in. Amado knew it. He rarely slept in the same place twice. He constantly changed locations, used false identities, purchased properties under aliases, and quietly prepared escape routes should everything collapse. Finally, he made the decision that would define the closing chapter of his life. In early July 1997, using the alias Antonio Flores Montes, Amado checked into a private clinic in the exclusive Polanco district of Mexico City. His goal was simple: disappear, not by crossing another border, but by becoming someone else. According to official accounts, he underwent extensive cosmetic surgery, intended to alter his appearance. The operation lasted for hours. When it was finally over, the surgeons believed it had been a success. Amado was moved into recovery. Then, everything changed. In the early hours of July 4th, 1997, Amado Carrillo Fuentes was pronounced dead. The official explanation was heart failure, reportedly triggered by complications following the lengthy operation and the effects of anesthesia and other medications. He was just 42 years old. Or at least, that's the story the world was told. The official story seems straightforward. The body was identified. DEA agents were permitted to examine it and take photographs. A funeral was held in Sinaloa. For the authorities, the case was closed. But for many others, it was only beginning. Not long after Amado's death, several of the doctors and medical staff involved in his surgery were themselves murdered. The killings shocked investigators and fueled immediate speculation. Were they executed in revenge for a failed operation? Or were they silenced because they knew something the world wasn't supposed to know? No definitive answer has ever emerged. Instead, the mystery only deepened. Rumors spread through the underworld. Some claimed Amado had died exactly as officials reported. Others insisted the operation had been the perfect cover, that he escaped under a new identity while someone else was buried in his place. Despite official investigations and later forensic examinations supporting the conclusion that Amado died during or shortly after the surgery, the speculation has never completely disappeared. Whether driven by evidence, folklore, or the legend that surrounded him, the question continues to linger. What is beyond dispute is the void he left behind. After a brief and bloody power struggle, his brother Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, known as El Viceroy, assumed control of the Juarez cartel. But the empire Amado had built was already beginning to crack. The Juarez cartel survived, yet its golden age had ended. Over the years, it fractured, weakened, and became entangled in even more violent conflicts that reshaped Mexico's criminal landscape. Amado Carrillo Fuentes changed the drug trade forever. He transformed air trafficking into a sophisticated operation, strengthened the partnership between Colombian suppliers and Mexican cartels, and proved that power didn't always belong to the loudest man in the room. Sometimes, it belonged to the one nobody noticed, and perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. A man who spent his life avoiding the spotlight became one of the most legendary figures in the history of organized crime. His empire wasn't destroyed in a dramatic shootout, or by a final stand against the authorities. It ended in the silence of an operating room, where the man who had spent years hiding from the world was, according to the official account, unable to escape himself. Think about the boy from Sinaloa, the child who looked around his village and believed there had to be something more. He left with almost nothing. No wealth, no power, only a promise. And somehow, he kept it. He became one of the richest and most powerful criminals the world had ever seen. He built an empire that stretched across borders. He controlled the skies. He influenced governments. He changed the way the drug trade operated forever. But there was a price for everything he built. Because the same ambition that lifted Amado Carrillo Fuentes above everyone else also trapped him inside the world he created. He could buy planes. He could buy properties. He could buy protection. But he could never buy peace. He could hide from enemies. He could hide from governments. He could even try to hide behind a new face. But he could never escape the man he had become. That is the tragedy of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, a poor boy who dreamed of escaping poverty, only to build a life where he was never truly free. The Lord of the Skies reached higher than almost anyone of his generation. But every empire eventually falls. And when Amado finally came down, it wasn't in a battlefield. It wasn't during a dramatic chase. It happened in the quiet silence of a hospital room, where even the most powerful man in the sky was powerless. The story of Amado Carrillo Fuentes is not just about money, crime, or power. It is a reminder that every rise has a cost, and every empire eventually meets its end. If this story of ambition, power, and the price of the shadows stayed with you, tell us in the comments. Who should we cover next in the long, dark history of those who rose and fell? Until then, stay curious, stay careful, and remember, the higher they fly, the harder the ground waits. Power, wealth, fear. Our final story is different. It's about the man who became the king of rock and roll. This is the story of Elvis Presley. They called him the King. Millions adored him. Crowds screamed his name so loudly that his voice was often drowned out by the sound of their devotion. He wasn't just a singer. He became the face of a generation, the man who changed music forever. But behind the glittering stage lights, behind the sold-out arenas, behind the gold records and the walls of Graceland, there was another story unfolding. A story of unimaginable fame, extreme pressure, personal struggles, and a man trying to survive inside the world he had created. How does a poor boy from Tupelo rise from nothing and become the most famous entertainer on earth? How does a man who seemed to have everything begin to face battles that the world never saw? This is the story of Elvis Presley, the boy who changed music, the icon who became a legend, and the journey that took him from a small Mississippi town to the highest throne in entertainment history. Because sometimes, the hardest battle isn't reaching the top, it's surviving there. January 8, 1935. In a tiny two-room shotgun house in East Tupelo, Mississippi, Gladys Presley gave birth to twin boys. The first, Jesse Garon Presley, was born still. 35 minutes later, a second baby entered the world. His name was Elvis Aaron Presley. From his very first breath, Elvis lived with the presence of a brother he would never know. That loss would remain a quiet part of his story, a reminder that his life began with both a blessing and a tragedy. It was the first hardship he would experience. It would not be the last. The Presley family had very little. Money was scarce. The house was small. And every day was a struggle to survive. The family often lived without the comforts many people took for granted. But what they lacked in wealth, they made up for with love, faith, and determination. His father, Vernon Presley, struggled to provide for the family. Life became even harder when Vernon served a short prison sentence for altering a check, leaving Gladys to carry the weight of raising Elvis during one of the most difficult periods of their lives. But through all the uncertainty, one person never stopped believing in him. His mother, Gladys. To her, Elvis wasn't just her son, he was her miracle. She protected him fiercely, encouraged his dreams, and made him feel that he was destined for something greater than the poverty surrounding them. Their bond was extraordinary. Gladys was Elvis's greatest source of comfort and confidence, even after fame found him, after millions of people began calling him the king. Elvis remained deeply connected to his mother's love and approval. He rarely made an important decision without thinking about what Gladys would have wanted. Those humble days in Tupelo were filled with hardship, but they were also filled with music. Every Sunday, gospel hymns echoed through the family church. Young Elvis listened closely to every voice, every harmony, and every emotion carried through those songs. He wasn't simply hearing music, he was feeling it, the passion of gospel, the power of rhythm, the emotion behind every word. Without realizing it, he was collecting the sounds that would later become the foundation of his legendary voice. The boy who grew up surrounded by struggle was slowly discovering the one thing that would change his life forever: music. No one in that small Mississippi town could have imagined what was coming, because the shy little boy growing up in poverty, the child who once had nothing but a dream, was about to become the most famous entertainer on earth. By 1953, the Presley family had settled in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis was 18 years old, driving a truck for Crown Electric, and dreaming of a future he couldn't yet see. One summer afternoon, carrying little more than hope and $4, he walked into Memphis recording service to record a song as a birthday gift for his mother. The song was My Happiness. To almost everyone, it was just another recording. But receptionist and recording assistant Arian Keisker heard something special. She wrote a simple note beside his name: Good ballad singer, hold. It was only a few words, but they would change everything. Behind the scenes, producer Sam Phillips had spent years searching for a voice that could blend country music with the rhythm and blues pouring out of Memphis's Beale Street. Then Elvis walked through his door. Quiet, shy, unassuming. But when he sang, his voice carried a power no one could ignore. On July 5, 1954, Elvis joined guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black for another recording session. Nothing seemed to work. Then, during a break, Elvis casually began playing Arthur Crudup's That's All Right. Bill Black joined in. Scotty Moore followed. The room suddenly came alive. Sam Phillips immediately recognized what he was hearing and rushed to record it. In that moment, a musical revolution had found its voice. The record spread across Memphis almost overnight. Radio stations couldn't stop playing it. Listeners flooded the phone lines asking the same question: Who is that? Within months, Elvis Presley had become a sensation. Teenagers packed his shows. Girls screamed so loudly that the music was often drowned out. Parents were shocked. Preachers condemned him. Critics called him a bad influence. But the louder the outrage became, the bigger Elvis grew. It wasn't just the music. It was the swagger, the curled lip, the swinging hips, the confidence. America had never seen anything like him. When Elvis appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, his movements were considered so controversial that, during one appearance, the cameras filmed him primarily from the waist up. The shy truck driver from Tupelo had become the center of a cultural revolution. America had found its king. It just didn't know it yet. By 1956, Elvis Presley was no longer a rising star. He was a global phenomenon. The young man from Tupelo, Mississippi, had transformed from a controversial newcomer into the biggest name in entertainment. Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, Love Me Tender. Hit after hit climbed the charts, and with each new record, his legend grew stronger. His voice was different. His style was different. His performances were unlike anything audiences had ever seen before. Fans lined the streets just to catch a glimpse of him. Teenagers screamed his name. Parents debated whether he was a symbol of rebellion or the future of music. Wherever Elvis went, crowds followed. Hollywood came calling, and soon the king was appearing on the big screen, becoming not just a music icon, but a cultural force. Then, in 1958, another chapter began. At the height of his fame, Elvis Presley was drafted into the U.S. Army. It was a moment that shocked the world. The biggest entertainer on the planet was being called away just as his career was reaching new heights. He could have fought for special treatment. He could have avoided the spotlight of military service. But he didn't. Elvis chose to serve like thousands of other young Americans. He cut his famous hair, put on the uniform, trained as a soldier, and was stationed in Germany. For a performer used to screaming crowds and flashing cameras, military life was a completely different world. Yet even while he was away, the world never stopped waiting for the king's return. His records continued to sell. His fans remained loyal. And the question everyone asked was simple: would Elvis still be the same when he came home? When Elvis returned in 1960, music had changed. New artists were emerging. New sounds were taking over. But America's love for Elvis hadn't disappeared. He returned to sold-out records, television appearances, and a long string of Hollywood films. Some became classics. Many followed the same predictable formula. Still, audiences couldn't get enough. The king was still powerful. His name still meant success. He bought Graceland, the mansion that became a symbol of everything he had achieved. A place that represented wealth, fame, and the dream he had chased since childhood. But years later, it would also become a symbol of the pressure and isolation that came with his success. In Germany, Elvis had met a young woman named Priscilla Bewley. Years later, their relationship led to marriage, and together they welcomed their daughter, Lisa Marie. For a brief moment, it seemed the boy from Tupelo had finally found the life he had always dreamed of. A successful career, a family, a home fit for a king. But behind the success, the cracks were already beginning to show. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, continued steering him toward one movie after another. The films made money, but they slowly pulled Elvis away from the raw energy, creativity, and rebellious spirit that had made him a revolutionary. The artist who once changed music was now following a formula. Elvis knew something was missing. He wanted to make different music. He wanted to challenge himself. He wanted to prove he was more than just a movie star playing the same role again and again. But he trusted Parker completely. That loyalty would become one of the most expensive decisions of his life. Because while the world believed the king was sitting comfortably on his throne, the foundation beneath it was already beginning to crack. Then came what many thought was impossible. In 1968, Elvis stepped onto a television stage wearing black leather and reminded the world who he truly was. The performance, later known as the Comeback Special, was electric. The confidence was back. The voice was powerful. The energy that had once shocked the world had returned. for one unforgettable night. The king reclaimed his throne, but behind that triumphant comeback, a new struggle was already beginning. Soon came Las Vegas. The glittering lights, the rhinestone jumpsuits, the endless residencies. Night after night, Elvis walked onto the same stage, performed the same songs, and carried the weight of being a legend who could never stop. The crowd still loved him. The applause was still deafening. But slowly, the music that once felt rebellious began to feel like a routine. The man who had changed the world was becoming trapped by the very success he created. And behind the curtain, another battle was beginning. It started with prescription medication, stimulants to stay awake, sedatives to sleep, painkillers to deal with the physical demands of constant touring and years of strain. At first, they seemed like tools to help him keep going. But over time, they became something he could no longer easily escape. The man who once controlled every stage was slowly losing control of himself. In 1972, Priscilla left. Their divorce was respectful, but the separation left Elvis deeply hurt. The relationship that had once represented stability was gone, and Elvis became more isolated. He withdrew further and relied heavily on the Memphis Mafia, a group of longtime friends who cared about him, but often failed to stop his decline. Yet even during his darkest years, moments of brilliance remained. In 1973, Aloha from Hawaii was broadcast live around the world, showcasing that the king could still command a stage like few others. Millions watched. The voice was still there. The charisma was still there. But something had changed. The man who once seemed unstoppable was now fighting a battle away from the spotlight. The spark that had once set the world on fire was beginning to fade off. By 1976, the king was slowly disappearing. The man who once commanded the world's attention was becoming a shadow of himself. Graceland had become less of a home, and more of a refuge from a world that had become overwhelming. Elvis rarely left, except to perform the concerts Colonel Tom Parker continued to schedule. Every performance demanded more from a body that was already struggling. Years of relentless touring, chronic health problems, and heavy reliance on prescription medications had taken a serious toll. The energy that once seemed limitless was fading. Some nights, he struggled to sleep. Other times, he would disappear into long periods of rest. Friends remembered late-night phone calls filled with loneliness, and quiet hours spent at the piano playing gospel music, the same music that had inspired him as a child. Even with all the fame surrounding him, Elvis was searching for something he had lost. Peace. Purpose. The feeling of being the boy from Tupelo again. By 1977, every performance carried a quiet sadness. The fans still screamed. The arenas were still packed. People still loved him. But many could see what they didn't want to accept. The king was fading in front of them. On June 26, 1977, Elvis walked onto the stage in Indianapolis for what would become his final concert. The crowd came to see a legend. They had no idea they were witnessing the final chapter of his career. Just 7 weeks later, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive at his home in Graceland. He was only 42 years old. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, though medical experts have long recognized that years of health problems and extensive prescription drug use contributed to his decline. The voice that had changed popular music, the voice that had inspired generations, was suddenly silent. The king was gone, but the legend was only beginning. Elvis Presley didn't just become famous. He transformed popular music. Over the course of his career, he sold more than 1 billion records, inspired generations of artists, and became one of the most recognizable figures the world has ever known. He helped bring the sounds of gospel, country, rhythm and blues, and rock and roll to millions of people, forever changing the course of modern music. But the story of Elvis is about more than records or sold-out concerts. It is a reminder that extraordinary fame comes with an extraordinary price. Behind the bright lights was a man searching for peace, struggling under expectations that seemed impossible to escape. At the center of it all was still the boy from Tupelo, the son who never stopped loving his mother, the dreamer who simply wanted to sing. Today, Graceland remains one of the most visited homes in America. Every year, fans from around the world leave flowers, light candles, and celebrate the life of the man they still call the king. Because legends don't live forever, but their influence does. Elvis Presley rose from a small house in Mississippi to stand at the very top of the world. His voice changed music. His presence changed popular culture. And his story reminds us that even the brightest stars cast the longest shadows. This was the rise. This was the ruin. And this was Elvis Presley. 4 men, 4 different worlds. One changed music forever. One became the voice of a generation. One controlled a nation. One built a criminal empire that reached across the skies. Their journeys were different, but their stories remind us that fame, power, and success can come with a price. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Rize To Ruin for more stories of the legends who shaped history.